I had this very cluttered and boring pantry closet. I cleaned out the closet, removed the shelves. I then grabbed some very colorful 12 by 12 inch vinyl tiles. Once I cut it, I simply peeled off the backing that comes on the tile and exposed the adhesive. I also used some painter's tape just to hold everything together. I used a little piece of painter's tape to mark where the hole was so that it would make it easier for me to reattach the clips later. I put the wire shelving back in place. I will admit, it did make me notice how dingy my wire shelving was. I purchased some sheets of plywood from the hardware store. I cut my plywood to the size of the shelving. I just added the plywood on top of the 1x3, and I used a nail gun to secure it in place. Once I had them all in, they looked great, but I definitely wanted to stain them to make them a little bit of a darker, richer color. The problem, for me, I really wanted it to look a lot lighter and brighter. I cleaned the cabinets thoroughly. I removed the cabinet pulls and then took the doors off of the hinges. This allowed me to paint the cabinets and the cabinet boxes. I painted them white, and the process was very quick and easy. Once I applied a few coats and allowed that to dry, I put the cabinets back in place. I wanted to personalize the pulls a bit, and I did so using some jute string. After that, it was time for me to work on the dark granite countertop. This project started with cleaning, lightly sanding, and then re-cleaning the counters. Next, I applied white paint from a marbling kit to the countertops. I applied a second coat, which covered a bit more. I applied a third coat as well. I painted on the lines using the gray paint that came in the kit. Then I softened those lines. After I got those looking the way I wanted them to, I added the epoxy on top. I purchased a silver peel and stick online. I wrapped the black dishwasher. Before you spend money on expensive tile, check out this $100 idea. I used Shiplap and cut it to size the length of my kitchen wall, and then I painted it using a paint sprayer. I placed my first piece in the kitchen, and I made sure to mark where the outlets were. I needed to cut just the little tongue part of the Shiplap to make sure that it would not go over the outlet area. I did this using a tool called a multi-tool. It worked well for me and was really quick. I simply placed the shiplap in place and secured it using a nail gun. I continued this way up the wall. It took me 4 pieces of shiplap to get to the top of the backsplash and fit right underneath the cabinet. After that, I put my new appliances in and added little trim pieces to the edges to give my project a finished look. After updating this 1980s kitchen, I knew it needed something more. So I decided to use an adhesive tile mat along with mosaic tile sheets, white grout, and a sponge. The adhesive mat comes on a roll. When it came to the outlets, I made sure the power was off, and I simply cut the mat with a razor blade so that I could create an opening around the outlet and disposal switch area. When I was ready to place the tile, I removed the white cover sheet. You can use spacers when installing the tile sheets, but I felt comfortable working without them. The work progressed pretty easily, and I was lucky that, at the first corner, the tiles ended in just the right spot. When I got to the second corner, I wasn't quite so fortunate. My husband was helping me out at the tile saw while I was doing the installation, and he went ahead and cut right down the tile mosaic sheet for me. When I got to the outlet and light switch area, I was able to press the tile into place just very lightly and then cut away the tile. I added the grout and then went over it with a damp sponge to get the grout residue off of the tile surface. I rinsed and repeated the cleaning with the damp sponge several times.
We started with a completely bare backsplash. Measure the length and height of each panel will need to be cut to. Now mark the panels to the correct size to be cut and cut them with the saw of your choice. I used a jigsaw and a table saw to make the cut. I found it easiest to lay the panels flat on the ground in a line as I cut them to make sure they lined up exactly. Next, you will need to take the panels in and mark where notches may need to be cut in order for the panels to fit under the cabinets. Take a tube of toothpaste and squirt a little on the corners of each outlet. Then slide your panels into place. Then remove them again, and the toothpaste will have transferred to the back of the panel, showing where you need to cut the hole for the outlet. Now you're ready to set your panels in place. First, put construction adhesive on the back of the panels and then press them into place. Use a nail gun or panel nails to attach the panels into place. Now it's time for the faux finish. Sporadically paint the bricks various colors. I use white, tan, black, gray, and brown. Then use a wet rag to blend all the colors together. Lastly, spread the spackle on like a thin coat of icing.
So this is grout, like what you would use for tile. It's pre-mixed. Where the border would be on the brick, that's where you're going to put this stuff with your fingers.
Today's project starts with a few end tables that you can pick up from your local Walmart or IKEA, and they're simple to put together. Put a wheel on the bottom to make this table mobile. Get a nut that will fit on the end of those threads, and we've got to glue it to the bottom of the leg. But we want to make sure we add a washer to give it some strength, as we're going to use a 2-part epoxy. We're going to take the epoxy and put it around the edge of the bolt next to the washer, and on the bottom of our table, turn it on its side, and we've got to glue a piece of strip of wood on the bottom. Go ahead and just put some around the hole on the bottom of the leg, and we're going to take that little invention we did with the washer and the nut and stick it right on there. Make sure it gets nice and secure. That allows us now to screw the wheel into the bottom of the leg. Gotta join these 2 tables together. Once you get it all on there on all 4 corners, go ahead and stick the other table right on top. Once it dries up in about 20 minutes, it's super strong and it's time to paint it. Went ahead and put these 3 boards in for the base, and they sit there really nice. It also gives some strength, but it's time to finish the top. I want to use some contact paper.
I started with a pre-cut pine board that I bought from Lowe's that was about the same size as the stainless steel film that I bought on Amazon. The board was a little bit longer, but I measured and cut off 3 inches. I wanted the stainless steel to wrap around the edges of the board. For the legs, I measured and cut 1x3 and 1x4 inch pine boards to 32 3/4 inches. Using wood glue and brad nails, I completed 4 legs. For the shelves, I cut 1x3 inch pine, making 2 boxes, which I glued and nailed in place. I made 2 of these shelves. I attached the legs to the outside of the bottom shelf. Then I flipped it upside down and attached the top shelf the exact same way. For the bottom shelf, I measured and cut 9 1x4 inch pine and glued and nailed them into place. For the sides of the island, I added 1x3 inch pine cut to form the shape of a V, and I glued and nailed them on each side. For the feet, I cut squares out of 1x3 and then attached casters to those squares. They were glued and nailed in place on the bottom of each leg. I laid the top in place and measured around to make sure that it was an equal distance. Then I nailed it in place. I carefully laid the film on top and smoothed it, pulling the film a little bit at a time and smoothing it into place. For the edges, I bent the film over the sides and stapled them in place. I folded the corners as you would wrap a gift and stapled those in place.
To start, you'll need 3 Parsons end tables, and I purchased mine at Walmart. I put 2 of the tables together. It was really easy. All you had to do was screw in the legs. For the 3rd table, I didn't use the legs, and I drilled the holes just a little bit bigger so I could fit rolling wheels in them. Use some E6000 or glue of your choice and put it on the bottom of the legs on 2 of your tables. Stack your tables on top of the tabletop with the wheels.